Okay. The last thing we're going to talk about in this chapter are the way the economists, what methods do they use when they're analyzing the economy. And they have a few different things that they do in order to explain things that are happening in the economy, or to come up with hypotheses as to what's happening. And the first is a scientific method. This is the same method that you use in science. It's got the 5 different steps to it. The first meaning pose a question. Posing a question. Then maybe you need to move over to this table while we're doing this. Okay? Just while we're doing this. So you look. You decide. Your state decides that, you know what? If we reduce the speed limit to 55 miles an hour, we are going to save 20% in gas fuel. Okay? People are driving slower, they don't burn as much gas when they do that. I think that that's a good idea. So that's the question. If we lower the speed limit to 55, will that save us on the amount of gas that we use? And what you want to do is research that question. Maybe other states have done that. Is there really a correlation between driving slower and saving gas fuel? Well, you want to look for as much information as you can regarding this question. Okay. Third, you want to then develop a hypothesis. Well, I came up with this question, I did a bunch of research, and I'm going to say, if we lower the speed limit 10 miles an hour, we will save, 10% in gas over the next 6 months. That's my hypothesis. Then you conduct some studies. Look at some different, control groups or whatever, and conduct some studies about whether or not this is actually the case. Then collect and analyze all that information. Once you have done that, then you can look at your hypothesis and say, was it a valid hypothesis? Do I need to change it a little bit? Is it completely wrong? I need to abandon it. Okay? So just like you would do a scientific question in economics, the scientific method is used the same way. Okay, so the scientific method is the first tool for an economist. Does everybody have this? The second one is using a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional world. That means a graph. Okay? A graph, anybody who's had math, knows that it's a visual representation of the relationship between two given sets. So in this particular chapter, I think they're comparing education versus salary level. If you have so much education, how much money will you make over your lifetime? Are we taking notes back there? Okay. So I know in math you've used graphs before where, you compare two things. You have your variable, and that's the quantity that can change. And And this graph will look just like a graph in math. And then the curve can be any line representing data on a graph. It can be straight lines too. They call it curves, and you can have a line that curves, but generally, when you think of graph, you think of straight lines and they intersect. If you have data and you plot your points on your graph and draw a line or draw a curve, that is what they're talking about. And an example of a graph is, right here we're looking at level of education versus average income by educational level. If you have some high school, 20,000, high school diploma, you're up to 30,000. Some college is 35, and up. As your educational level rises, theoretically, so should your income level. You don't have to write this down. I'm just showing you an example of a graph. This is so big. All right. And then finally, the last tool that economists use are the economic model. Okay, and these are just simplified representations of reality. So you look at the economy as a whole, and if you change one thing, how will that affect everything else? So when you're looking at an economic model, it's very simplified. Because you're only changing one thing. You're raising gas prices 10 cents. What will that do? If we lower the interest rate 0.5%, how will that change the way the economy is running? So you take one thing and you change it, and then you look at how it affects the economy. And this is all theoretical. And then the second one is the rational behavior model. If you think about rational behavior, they're assuming everybody acts rationally. If something happens, you're going to look out for your own best interests. This is the Adam Smith thing with the invisible hand. Everybody looks out for their own self-interest. So, if something happens in the economy, people will look out for themselves. That's natural human behavior. So that's what the rational behavior model is that they can kind of predict how people will act because, most people are rational human beings looking out for themselves or their family. And whenever you do any kind of tool to analyze anything in the economy, they have a saying, all things being equal. Okay? So you have to assume that, all things being equal, if you change this one thing, this is what might happen. Okay? Because you have to be able to theoretically control it to a certain extent.